Oh my goodness gracious. We are back. It's the score. Hello, scorekeepers. How's everyone doing? Yes, we're on Wednesdays now. We're not late. We're on Wednesdays now. As always, I am Rocky. I am here with the amazing Paige and Lee. Hello, Paige and Lee. How are you all?
Peace. I'm doing good.
That good? Okay. And of course, this is The Score. This is Minnesota's opera's podcast, all about opera, classical music, pop culture, from the perspective of three Black queer administrators. And y'all, I'm sorry if I sound a little weird today. I have a cold. And that has not happened to me in years. I tested, it's not COVID. But like yesterday, I had to take to my bed because I had a cold. It's insane.
There's something going around.
There
I feel like
is.
there's definitely something going around. I had a cold when I got back from traveling a couple weeks ago. I know a couple other people who have been sick and they were like, we tested and it's not COVID. So y'all, just because you vaccinated or whatever, or just because you think you don't have COVID, please wash your hand. Y'all are spreading other stuff around here still. Go back to the beginning of the pandemic where you were washing and sanitizing and stuff. There are some habits we need to keep as a society. Refill the automatic hand sanitizer things. They've been empty everywhere I go. Like, I need us to care again.
And can we stop like with the shaking hands thing? That was really nice. Wearing masks, that's really nice. Because this is not it, y'all. This coughing and sneezing business. Anyway, but enough about me. So Lee, you are on the road again. Where are you at?
So I had a really great opportunity to visit Michigan, one of my new favorite states, definitely top 50 for sure. I haven't spent a ton of time in Michigan, but I got to visit Detroit and spend a day in Flint this week. It was not my first time in Detroit, but was my first time in Flint. And it was really great to see that despite all of the, I would say, really complicated media coverage they've received in the last couple of years. It's a city that is certainly on the rebound, right? And a lot of people coming together from the community to try to do a lot of uplift, and it looks really good. Things are coming along, and I got to spend some time with some very talented young kids, young budding musicians, bunch of beautiful Black children learning to sing and play instruments, and it was very, very good for the soul. And tomorrow I am headed home to the Big Apple and super excited to be going home and seeing people I love, and also seeing angry people yelling at each other and complaining about everything. I can't tell you how much I've missed that. All this politeness out here is killing me. So I'm looking forward to being home. Yeah. Sure is.
A little spice again.
Just a little.
Just a little. I find I still have so much of my New York experience still in me. We were talking the other day, Lee, about how I still like find myself walking down the street just talking to myself, because like that's perfectly acceptable behavior.
Perfectly
in New York.
Acceptable.
And here I get weird looks.
I find that here in general, it's a little, I don't know if people mind their business just a little bit less, or maybe, maybe because there's not as much going on, other business for you to mind. You feel like people are minding yours more.
A whole lot of that.
I'm just walking down the sidewalk in deep conversation with myself. I feel like that should be fine. maybe y'all should try it.
Maybe you would work some things out.
Maybe.
So what's going on with you this week, Iyawo?
Oh, this week, what has been going on? I feel like I was traveling quite a bit. I went to DC for my partner's birthday, and then I went to
Oh,
I saw
Atlanta.
that, and I had a bone to pick with you,
Oh,
Iyawo.
let's
Because
pick
how
it right
dare
here on the
you
air.
go? How dare you go and eat that delicious vegan mac and cheese
listen,
and not bring any back for me?
I know. It made you want to fight seeing it on my Instagram stories because that's how I would feel. And I'm sorry, but
what is
I
the new
just
name of that place? Because it used to be Soul Veg.
it was so bad. That place has had 50-11 names. So if you have been in the DC area and been to the Black vegan spot, you know, the one that's been here forever. It's been called Soul Veg. Right now it's called New Vegan Cafe. For a little bit it was called Woodlands, and for a long time it was called Everlasting Life. It's the one on Georgia Avenue.
Yes.
And which street? It's not Irving. Is it Harvard maybe? Anyway, the one on Georgia Ave near Howard.
Yeah, I mean, that's all you need to know.
That's all you need to know. But if you've been there, you know they have the best vegan mac and cheese in the world. It never misses.
It doesn't matter what time of day, what day of the week it is. It is so good. I don't know what they put in it.
I don't know. It's been good when I first get there, like not long after they open. It's good when you're one of the last people there at the end of the day. You don't even see that many pieces left. Like it's still just always good.
Like it's so good that it feels like that there should be something wrong. Right?
Like, yeah. Like there's something abnormal here going on.
Anyway, but I'm sorry. I just had to talk about that mac and cheese because it was on your Instagram and I was just like, no, I want it.
It's funny because even Damien Lee messaged me and was just like, what's that on your plate? It looks right. He said it looks right, and I was like, it was very right.
I love that he's gone from just eating off of my plate to now literally harassing people on social media about what's on their plates.
But you know what? I never mind because I'm just like, I want everyone to be envious of the plate and to go to that spot because I need them to stay open forever.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Like, yeah. So shout out to currently New Vegan Cafe. We'll see what name is next. As of right now, today is September 30th, 2022. It is called New Vegan Cafe. So yeah, but then I went to Atlanta
oh wow,
for a festival for an important ancestor in my spiritual lineage, the Metahochi. He was a great teacher and like just all around advocate for African traditional religions and culture, like in the United States. Like a lot of people learned from him, and he just helped preserve like a lot of knowledge from African spiritual systems and bring together a lot of folks from all over the diaspora too to learn from each other and to, you know, celebrate our common root. So that was a really, really beautiful festival just around beautiful Black folks in a blackety black city and doing blackety black things. And shout out to Black folks and all our regalia. And our African regalia, just looking fly as ever. Everyone looked like they smelled like cocoa butter. And yeah. Unfortunately, I had a cold when I got back, but I felt like it was just like my body having to recalibrate itself.
Sure.
After all that traveling and all the wonderful things we did. And now I'm good and things are back to normal. Yeah.
Well, Welcome back. And this will not be any kind of diatribe, but I think the reason that both of you also had colds is because the weather has turned here.
Yes.
I
Ooh.
don't know who's in charge of this kind of thing, but it's not supposed to be this cold yet. Like I just don't think that's supposed to be what's happening. And I knew it would. It was too good to be true. I had a couple of good months. I thought Minnesota and I had an understanding, and then like a week ago, all went to trash.
It was like somebody flipped a switch. Because
Yes.
last Tuesday it
Yeah.
was 90 degrees, and then the next day it was 60 degrees. And it was literally like somebody like left the room and just turned the light off. Like, it's crazy. How am I supposed to make that shift so quickly in my brain, my body? Yeah, so yeah, my body's rebelling. Because my body is just like, no, you were supposed to be on a beach in some tropical location where it's warm and lovely.
I was wearing sweaters all week,
Mhm.
and it's
Mhm.
September. Like I swear I didn't know that was a thing. But once
Oh yeah.
again, joke's on me.
I was trying to hold out until at least October to
Hmm.
turn our heat on. She
Yeah.
Hmm.
I couldn't. I couldn't. I said, y'all, I'm turning the heat on. I'm so sorry. I'm not about this wrap up in a blanket life and wait for you know. No. Yeah. I felt like I broke like like a black cardinal rule. Like everyone has in their minds that date around that time when they turn the heat on for the season. And I felt like I was a little early. I couldn't make it. I am not one of God's strongest soldiers.
Well, I feel like that's perfectly respectable and fine because we all just have to
Yeah.
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. But on this beautiful Friday morning, yes, this is Friday when we're recording this, right?
Yes,
I don't even like,
TGIF.
oh my gosh.
Mhm.
But it's a beautiful, it's pretty to look at. The trees
Yeah.
and things are beginning to
Mhm.
turn, and we're all getting our pumpkin lattes or whatever. And we have an incredible guest on the show today. We're so excited that we were able to grab some time with this incredible person because they are so busy. Of course, I am talking about musician, activist, radio host, podcast host, all the things. The incredible Garrett McQueen is on the show today, and we are
Woohoo.
so happy that he's able to join us. So stay tuned, and we will be joined by Garrett on the other side of this break. Woohoo! All right, and we are back, everyone, and we are so blessed and happy to have our next guest on the show today. A proud native of Memphis, Tennessee, Garrett McQueen is a bassoonist, an activist, a performer, radio host, and all sorts of other things, who says that giving voice and offering space to music by Black creators and marginalized composers drives his passion for music and continues to be his primary focus as a performer. In addition to performing with more orchestras and symphonies that I could possibly name or count, it would take up the whole interview. Garrett is the host and producer behind a number of nationally syndicated radio programs, including The Sound of 13 and The Sounds of Kwanzaa, and continues to work as a guest radio host in a number of American markets. Away from the airwaves, Garrett specializes in music and racial equity presentations with collaborators including the Gateways Music Festival, the Sphinx Organization, the Kennedy Center, the Apollo Theater, the San Francisco Symphony, and countless schools, colleges, and universities. Garrett has been noted as not only a classical agitator, but also a Black talent in public media that you may not know but should. In 2021, the New York Times noted his weekly podcast, Trilloquy, which watch out for us perhaps on Trilloquy in the coming weeks as a standout and one that is required listening for industry leaders and listeners alike. And if that wasn't enough, he's also the president of Trillworks Media, director of artist equity for the American Composers Orchestra, and a contributing writer for Represent Classical. He serves on the boards of the American Composers Forum and the Beethoven Festival Orchestra, and maintains leadership and artistic advisory positions with the Black Opera Alliance, the Gateways Music Festival, and Lakes Area Music Festival. Welcome to the show, sir. And also, he has very cool locks. Welcome to the show. Garrett, we're so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's always interesting to hear people read excerpts from my bio because I forget some of the stuff that's in there, and maybe just to get us kicked off. I am very intentional about Black equity and BIPOC equity in that order. I feel like we have gotten lost in the sauce, so to speak, when, it's very important to honor and to acknowledge the intersectionality of a lot of the conversations and initiatives we're putting out there. And Black folks, we have a very unique story. We have yet to be paid. It's a lot of communities out here who have a check that we have not been written. So I appreciate your highlighting that portion specifically, because we need to do a better job of living in our truth and being unapologetic about that, if you ask me.
Oh, absolutely.
And good morning.
And good morning.
Good morning. Yes.
Well, one of the things when I was reading your bio that really stood out to me, and perhaps this is a dumb question, I'm sure you'll tell me if it is, but when I was a kid, I played the clarinet. Yeah. I've never talked about that before. All through middle school and high school, I played the clarinet. And so what jumped out at me in your bio was bassoonist. Mm-hmm. And it's not often that you meet a bassoonist, and it's not often that you meet a Black bassoonist. And so I'm just wondering, when and how did that bassoon get into your hands? What was that moment that you knew that the bassoon was the instrument for you? Like, how did all of that happen?
Yeah, when I was about 12 years old, I had already spent more than a decade, singing in the church. The Black church is where I learned how to read music and harmonize, and just where my musical foundations were created. So by the time I got into middle school, 7th grade, I didn't want to join the choir because I was like, no, that I already know how to do that. So maybe I should learn how to play an instrument. So I signed up for band. I wanted to play the flute. I did end up playing the flute, but the band director handed me a bassoon, and my mama was happy that she didn't have to buy nothing. So that's how it started. I fell in love with playing the bassoon, and stuck with it through middle school, high school, got a bachelor's and master's in bassoon, got caught up in playing the white man's music for about 10 years, and then that's when I made the shift about 2015 2016, made the shift into radio and the other sorts of activist and advocacy work that I do. But yeah, bassoon is the reason for it all. It's right over there. I try to pick it up just about every day to play a few notes. My chops aren't as hot as they used to be, but and good for some of the bassoonists out there too, because if I start practicing again, y'all in trouble. Some of y'all anyway.
I think that's a really great segue to something I'm really curious about, which is how your performing career, which seems like it's very active right now, even continues to inform the administrative American Composers Orchestra.
Yeah, there's this idea that the performing artists within an arts institution, are the ones who are centered and served and all of that sort of thing. Being on the administrative sides of things has given me a lot of insight on how. Okay, I'm gonna just talk. I'm just letting y'all know. All right, it's given me insight as to the degree to which performing musicians, just don't have a lot of insight or perspective on everything that goes into that chair being put there that you sitting in, that check that you cash after the gig, so having that behind the scenes perspective has really grown my appreciation for everyone on the administrative side of things. And when it does come time for me to actually get out my bassoon and play on stage, I'm just so much more mindful of everything that went into my being there. I think, all musicians should spend some time with an administrator just so that, they can have an idea of what our inboxes be looking like and what some of these conversations with funders be looking like and, everything in between. So it's really made me, more appreciative of the behind the scenes things that, make the sounds and the stagings and all of that stuff possible.
Shout out to that. I know that's why, at least in my education in theater, even they emphasize that everybody knows something about something. If you're a performer, you are not allowed to leave that building not knowing something about arts administration or what the stage manager has to do and all of that. And it also brings me back to, what you were talking about. I'm noticing a trajectory from, performance and education, and you talked about getting into activism more. Like, I wonder what that was like, and if like your education experiences like informed any of that. I love thinking and talking about like how we're educating Black musicians. And I think sometimes what we get or what we don't get, or artists in general, Black artists in general, what we get or what we don't get ends up like propelling us to a certain place. So I would love you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think Black musicians, we have, at least Black musicians of our generation, we were conditioned to live within two worlds. Well, so I'm from Memphis, so they call that home of the blues and all of that sort of thing. So I was very familiar with that music and of course the Black church music, but also there's a very specific and special brand of hip hop that exists and was born in Memphis. So, I grew up listening to, Project Pat and 3-6 Mafia, La Chat and all those folks. Juicy J is famous these days, but I remember when he was just, on the streets, on the corner with everybody else, But then that was always separated or put next to the so-called music education. So going to school and playing your scales and doing all that sort of thing. So, after a while, I just decided that is not normal. That's not okay. So, again, about 2015, 2016, I just sat there. I must have been playing a concert and I just realized, okay, I have this whole musical life and experience and perspective that has nothing to do with this space. And there is hardly anybody in this space who can help me speak to that or help me explore those things. So I guess that's really where the activism was born out of, just not allowing, this so-called classical ecosystem just continue to live in its own little bubble. I have to say a lot of the perspectives that I've gained just come from the hundreds and hundreds of people that I've interviewed and talked with over the years. There's an oboist named David Norville. He was on the first season of Trilloquy, and he said classical music spaces are the last unchallenged white supremacist spaces, and I think about just little gems like that and just move forward and trying to shake things up so that those multiple worlds that so many of us live in can actually be one world. I think it'll enrich the musicians. I think it'll enrich audiences, and ultimately it'll enrich the broader ecosystem of music. We just have to be willing to shake things up. And then of course there's the whole conversation of building our own spaces, building our own table. And while I definitely affirm that and think that is so important, the white folks not just going to be over there sitting comfortable and I'm not going to say nothing. So that's the sort of and then maybe that's another duality that we can explore. But my activism is really just rooted in unnormalizing the necessity for marginalized folks to live within multiple perspectives and multiple ways of thinking. I should be able to take my whole self into every space, and that's what I'm working toward for all of us.
May I ask a quick follow-up?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I think about relative to my own art making is how activism, or as you call it, agitation, and
Mm-hmm.
and being an artist sit very comfortably together, especially for those of us who are lucky enough to be Black, right? Like there's a long tradition of it. It makes a lot of sense. People even anticipate it. And then relative to administrative work, there's frequently a tension, right? Because you are in this space where you understand that, as a leader in an organization, you may be being called upon to represent a really broad set of people and concepts, right? And do you ever feel that tension between being able to um, put forward your personal perspectives while at the same time, responding to a job description?
These days, I don't. And the main reason is because I was able to make a way for myself. The first thing I'll say is, I speak from a lot of privilege. There's so many privileges that have gone into what I've been able to do and build for myself. But, after spending close to 2 years completely, out here by myself as an entrepreneur, figuring it out, getting grants from here or funding from here to keep my projects going, that cultivated for me a bit of confidence that basically, manifests in my bringing my full self to administrative roles and to, different organizations. So I'm very grateful. Shout out to Melissa Nahn, president and CEO of the American Composers Orchestra. She knows who I am, and she knows, who she hired for the position that I have with ACO. I'm very grateful for that. And I know that if one day, if I move away from the organization, things will be all right. So that gives me the confidence to, always stand in my truth and, not feel that necessity to, be respectable at all times or to, bite my tongue if there's something I actually want to say. With that being said, I'm also not the bull in the china shop. I really do believe in the power of dialogue. And I think, meeting of minds is where great change is created. So, I've gotten a lot of practice again through my interviewing sort of work and the Trilloquy podcast of doing a lot of listening to people. And I really do appreciate being able to utilize that skill in my work. But change is going to require all of us really standing in our truth and taking risks and really, forcing our way of thinking and being into the space of normalization.
When you were talking earlier about sort of your journey, it really resonated with me because, I grew up also, you know, playing the clarinet, like I said, singing in these spaces where I was just sort of expected to kind of sing this, traditional quote unquote classical
Mm-hmm.
sort of white music. God, I was in a madrigals choir for God's sake.
Ooh,
Like
child.
Madrigals.
Bless your heart.
Yes.
Northern Virginia, y'all. Um, but it wasn't until I got to college and I just kind of figured that I would just kind of keep going on that track. And
Mm-hmm.
it took me about a semester to realize, oh, I don't want to do that at all. I want to do my own thing. And obviously I think 19, I wasn't, sort of articulating it. I don't think I had the language to like, oh, this is white supremacy culture and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what I really, really wished that I had had at the time was, somebody who was around me who I could have this conversation with. Um, and it wasn't until like a little bit later in life that I started to sort of find my people, you know, feel as if I, had the language to articulate all of this. So I'm curious, as you sort of started your agitating your activism, were there mentors that you had that really inspired you?
Yeah. Among the privileges that I think about is the fact that, again, I grew up in Memphis. I grew up in a predominantly black city. I grew up in a city that wasn't only predominantly black, but where people are just real. I mean, people talk about how dangerous Memphis is and that sort of thing. And while that is true to a degree, I think it's just a population of people who don't accept certain norms. So, the further along I got in my career, the further away from that ecosystem I got. So I think that's really the main reason why I was forcing just my point of view and perspective, and continue to force that into so many spaces, because it just doesn't make sense to me for, there to be predominant, or maybe not, I don't know. It makes sense for some spaces to be predominantly white, I suppose, but for spaces to be all white, or 99% white in today's world, that shouldn't make sense to people, unless you're living, somewhere like Anchorage, Alaska. But then even in that case, we got to talk about the indigenous people. So again, we've just normalized the separation of these spaces, and that has never been okay with me. I just so happened, at my undergraduate institution, University of Memphis, I studied with a black man. Shout out to Lacolia in Washington. He's now at the Boston Community Music Center, running that organization. But so there were conversations that we had that mirrored my upbringing, so it was just also normal for me. So again, the further along I got, the further away from that ecosystem I got, and I felt like I needed to change it. I often think about Martin Luther King Jr. People need to understand that a lot of his activism was rooted in something similar. Down in Atlanta, there was a black fire station, a black grocery store. There was black wealth, of course, the black church. So when he got out into the world and saw that, not all black people got to live that way, he wanted to change it. So that's really what I want to do in music. I just want people, and not just black people. I do center that, but I just want everyone to be able to exist as they are in their own spaces. So, my long way of saying, there are several people that I can name, my parents, shout out to Lacolian, the hundreds of people that I've gotten to dialogue with over the years in my work. But really the root of it is just having blackness normalized and seeing it not normalized in classical music spaces, and working to bridge those gaps, build a bridge between those two realities.
Yeah, because I mean, why do you think that is? Because I don't like to use the term predominantly white spaces. I prefer white occupied spaces, because I feel like predominantly white spaces like implies that there wasn't a choice that was being made. Like, it's just naturally, we just like a river, we just flow in this one direction. And that's just like as if this wasn't like a deliberate choice that people were being made. Why do you think that is so prevalent in the classical music industry, in particular?
Because it's uncomfortable. Like you're making an incredible point. There is intentionality behind everything in our world. Nothing is just because, and some of those whys are generations behind us, and not as easy for us to identify as it relates to their contemporary manifestations. But yeah, it's just uncomfortable for an orchestra patron or an opera patron to think about the fact that the space that they're in has been curated. The audience experience that they're in is intentionally that. Once we, can separate the emotions from all of those conversations, we can get to that space. That's why things like data and statistics are so important. There are still a lot of people who just flinch up at the word black or the word white, but if you just really look at the way marketing happens in most of the institutions, if you look at the way development offices work when it comes to individual giving and institutional giving, when you look at all of these things, you see the energy being pointed to one specific community. I think that that way of being and that way of doing traditionally has been seen as neutral, whiteness being the norm or being the default, when in actuality you are pointing at one global minority, actually at the end of the day, and relying solely on that. So I think we just need to amp up our bravery, put on our big boy, our big girl, our big person pants, and dig into these conversations and just realize the reality of it. Whiteness is not the default; it's not the norm. It's just what's been centered, certainly in classical music.
Could we take a thread from that and pull on it just for a second? Because I think what you're saying is something that a lot of folks need to hear, especially one, that data is your friend in these instances. And then secondly, there is a history to understand if you're going to undo it, right?
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about maybe some of the things that you're working on either at ACO or ACF or anywhere else that actually work to do some of this undoing?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll shout out ACF. Under the American Composers Forum umbrella is a digital publication called I Care If You Listen. And there are lots of incredible folks over there doing that data-driven work just to show what gender breakdowns look like, to show how time as it relates to certain events, impacts or doesn't impact programming. For example, there has been violence in the Middle East and across the African continent for decades now. Everyone jumped to making programming shifts as soon as there was violence in Ukraine, and of course, our hearts go to those people, but that's just a reality that we have to face. I also think about, again, thinking about all the people I've had an opportunity to dialogue with. I want to shout out Titus Underwood. He's a Black man, principal oboe of the Nashville Symphony, and in our last in one of our conversations, he made the incredible point that the vast majority of the existing arts institutions today, the larger ones, were formed, if not during Jim Crow and straight up antebellum slavery. So why would Black composers make the stages at those institutions at that time in history? Why would there be Black performers or even audience members allowed in those spaces with these institutions built during that time? So if that's the foundation of American classical music as it's been institutionalized, of course, we see what we see today. It's just small truths like that, historical truths and contemporary truths, that I believe have to be the starting point and the baseline of the work. Again, the way things look is not just how it happened to be, it's the way that it was manufactured to be. So there has to be intentionality in undoing some of that work and transforming the field. That goes all the way down with the way we use that phrase, classical music. Folks who listen to the Trilloquy podcast know when I say that phrase, classical music, I'm talking about any foundational music connected with culture. So I'm talking about the African djembe. I'm talking about the Chinese erhu, the Japanese shamisen, the Indian vina and sitar, the American iteration of guitar, hip hop, gospel, jazz. All of those are classical musics. We have just been conditioned out of this fallacy of neutrality and what's the norm to associate that phrase with a classical music tied to the culture of one very specific part of the world. So it's not to discount Beethoven and Brahms and Rachmaninoff and Puccini and all of those people. We just have to put the way we've been taught to think about that aesthetic of music into the larger context of white supremacy and what it means to actually, affirm the culture of a people, the classical culture of a people. That goes for food, that goes for architecture, that goes for fashion, but we're in this world of music. So that's what I center on, really helping people understand the context behind our reality so that we know how to move forward.
Ashe to that. It has me thinking about yes, what you're saying about, like, I view classical music very much the same way. Like, anything that is foundational to the larger cultural context, to so many other genres. And I was taught about this music, American popular music, that way. I was fortunate
Mm-hmm.
enough to have an amazing guitar teacher in my older sister. Shout out to Dika. Shout out to Dika Wyatt. Um, Dika Reynolds. My bad, Dika Reynolds. And she didn't even only teach me guitar, but she taught me the foundation of how guitar is thought of today, how it's played today. So she was
Yep.
just like, no, it's not just rock. We're actually going to go back to spirituals and then talk about gospel. We're going to talk about country, that country is actually foundationally Black and
Yep.
folk. We're going to talk about that as well. And we're going to talk about Muddy Waters and Chuck Berry, and even then, like what she had me studying and who she had me listening to, not only their music, especially rock and roll, or folks who are touted as like I guess the main masters of guitar in that genre. They all pointed back to Chuck Berry.
Right.
Every single one of them, everyone from the Rolling Stones to Led Zeppelin to
the Beatles, all of those
about,
people.
The Beatles, yes, they're all going to point back to Chuck Berry. And I was like, oh, so they were creating our classical, is what you're saying. Is this okay? And I wonder what else you view that way, and in especially, I think, like Black American music. I will never get sick of hearing people redefine and reframe that for folks. So what do you want to lift up that maybe is, you don't necessarily see talked about as classical music in a larger context, but to you is just like, we need to look at this more?
Yeah, so for me, when it comes to reframing that phrase classical music for our American context, I'm thinking about musics that were not imported, musics that were really born here. So first and foremost, we have the eons of traditions of indigenous musicking. I use that phrase musicking. Shout out to the composer Brent Michael Davids, indigenous composer. He helped me understand that music as a product to be bought and sold and that sort of thing really in itself is a Western idea, because in indigenous cultures, and most indigenous cultures, there's not even a word for music. The idea of music is always in conjunction with a ceremony or doing something. So it's not just this singular thing. So there's that point to be made. But then alongside that, I often try to help people understand that with the exception of those indigenous traditions of musicking, those field hollers, the Negro spiritual, and everything that grew from that really serves as the unique American offering in the world of classical musics. So, we can talk about Florence Price and William Grant Still and all those people, but at the end of the day, that is they were working within a tradition that was imported to the United States, through the means of colonialism and that sort of thing. So if we center indigenous musicking and all of the reverberations and reiterations of the Negro spiritual, for me, that's what I believe we're talking about when we talk about classical music. When the story of, a country's music is told, if you tell the story of Jamaican music, you have to talk about reggae. You have to talk about Bob Marley. When you talk about the story of American music, you have to talk about Duke Ellington. You have to talk about Sister Rosetta Tharpe. And not that there aren't non-Black people in that conversation, but in the spirit of equity, I tend to center that conversation because, again, there was intentionality around building the idea of classical music and what it is here in the United States. So there has to be an equal, if not greater, bit of intentionality when it comes to dismantling that. So, to return to your original question, country, yes, classical music, folk, Americana, R&B, jazz, hip hop, all of those are American classical musics at the end of the day. We just have to shed ourselves from the respectability politics and the white supremacist way of thinking that makes it ridiculous to think of those things as classical musics, because at the end of the day, they are.
That also makes me think about the the intersections of class when it comes to
Yep.
what we think of with classical music, and where a lot of these genres were developed. Even when white folks did get into them, a lot of time it was poor white folks, or it was the
Right.
folks that other white folks didn't really mess with because they weren't respectable enough. And there's all those threads to tease out as well.
Yeah, and look, shout out to all of the allies and accomplices over the ages. One of my, another thing that I'm really grateful for when it comes to growing up in Memphis is just the history that's there. That's where Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. So if you go to the hotel that he was assassinated at is now the National Civil Rights Museum. So if you go there, there's a giant wall of everyone who was arrested in the in the fight for freedom. Everybody with their placards and everything, and it's people of all hues and all genders on that wall. So it's not about diminishing the contributions of certain communities. It's just about, using conversation and dialogue to highlight why we're where we are and how this reality came to be. So, and as I said before, once we get beyond the emotions of, words like racism and words like white supremacy, we can actually move forward. It's the same with gender. When somebody starts talking about how trash men are, I'm like, yeah, girl, I agree. We ain't worth nothing, or whatever, just to really take someone else's perspective and to, decenter yourself and understand what the vision is, what the goal is, what the direction is.
Can we talk about place just a little bit? Because you've referenced Memphis a couple of times, and sidebar, Paige, I was in Detroit earlier this week, had a grand time.
Hey, come on now, Detroit Rock City. Yeah.
I'm curious if you have a perspective on what is it about Memphis? Like, what was the collection of experiences and or people and or forces that made it into this place where so much music was able to thrive in that way?
Yeah, across culture, pain and heartache and trauma and challenge, has been the richest source of music. And it's a lot of that in Memphis, and historically there has been a lot of that. Going back to the Black church, that was where people could just let their hair down for a minute, or just to feel safe or free. So of course the music that's born in those spaces is going to be earth-shattering and so important. So I think that it's just the reality of the history and the circumstances of being there and living in that part of the country that I always think about. I can't live there these days because, I feel like I am more effective in my work north of the Mason-Dixon, well, there are certain things that I don't have to think about or engage on a daily basis by not living in that part of the country. I'm also, very cognizant of the environment and environmental change. So, Minnesota is a part of the country where I feel safer in that regard. But I always highlight and honor the place that I'm from because it's why I am who I am. I feel like if I grew up in a city or a part of the country that was white occupied, as you say, Rocky, where, blackness wasn't normalized across, all fields and all areas, I may not have the sense of urgency for change that I have now. So, it's like we say in my Buddhist practice. I'm a Nichiren Buddhist. If there's no mud, there's no lotus. So, you have to appreciate the hard times, the challenging times, to be able to have the good times. And I see Memphis as that for me, just a physical embodiment of so many struggles, so many stories, so much history, and how that manifested in a incredibly positive way for me and mine.
Well, relatedly, I'm curious what your experiences in Minnesota have been like, because coming from DC, Chocolate City, it was a bit of a culture
the city
shock.
formerly known as.
Yes, precisely. It was a little bit of a culture shock for me. So I'm curious what your experiences have been like over the last few years.
Yeah. So I moved to Minnesota from Knoxville, Tennessee. So before I moved here, I was playing second bassoon with the Knoxville Symphony. I moved here for a nationally syndicated overnight radio program called Music Through the Night. So my first little while here, I spent as a vampire. So there, so to speak, sleeping during the days, maintaining my overnight schedule. So work was really the center of it all. When my relationship with Minnesota Public Radio ended, that's when I began to, have the time and ability to get out and explore and meet people. That also so happened to be at the heat of COVID and quarantine. So you had that next era of my Minnesota life that was spent indoors, ordering Target delivery and DoorDash and doing all that. So really, it's really only been this past year that I've been able to explore and get out and feel like I can experience what Minnesota has to offer. And I have to say, so far, it's been an incredibly great fit. I think what I appreciate most about living in Minnesota is that there are a number of artists who also brush up against activism, and it's easy to just find yourself in those communities. Shout out to Tish Jones, shout out to Paviel French, shout out to Devon Russell Gray. I can, go on Queen Drea, all sort of Damian Strange. All of these people are folks who I have had the extreme privilege and benefit of just getting to know and not only collaborating with artistically and creatively, but having a drink with or just kicking it and doing that sort of thing. And I love it. I love that I've been able to be embedded in that community. I love that I am respected as a member of those communities. Anytime anyone is acting up on the orchestral front, they're like, all right, we'll call Garrett, see what he think. And it really feels good to, being a part of the country, to be here in the Twin Cities and get to experience that. I'm sure that exists, in cities across the country and around the world. But my experience with that here is the main reason why I continue to call this home.
That I had a similar experience moving here and finding that intersection of activism and art and people who just kind of brought me in. We're just like, hey, you're here, you're Black, you're into art and you into justice stuff. Come join us. Join us. And I love that you lifted that up because I'm sure it exists in other places, but I don't know. There's like kind of a special niche that exists here, like that I haven't experienced elsewhere. Like so often, the people that I'm making art with or happen to perform with are the people that I'm organizing with. Because I'm organizing. Often they're the same people. We run in the same circles, and
it's also
really at the forefront like that.
And it's also special because I feel like artists here of many hues, not just Black folks, actually are a part of their communities. It's so easy to, go to different cities, especially in our line of work. We tend to move for the job. So, we create our own little bubbles where we're only engaging with folks in our same industry. But that's really not the case here. I know I'm shouting out a lot of people. Shout out to Maria Issa, a Boricua artist here in the Twin Cities. She dipping her hand into politics, running for Minnesota State House of Representatives. So that means, there are relationships that she has to have with, everyday folks just walking down the street and living their lives. And, folks like her are our connection to those communities. So for me, it's so special to live here and not only, be among the artist communities, but just be among the homies. If there are any communities of people that I feel like I have distance from, it is the folks who play in the orchestras and do that sort of thing. And while I can work on those relationships and reach out to those people, it also just feels great to know that the homies got your back.
Yeah, shout out to the homies.
Shout out to all the homies.
Well, I'm looking at the time and I see that we are just about at time. But before we go, I just want to make sure that we, shout out your website, social medias. Where can people find you, listen to your work? Throw out all those credentials.
Yeah, I'm not as active on social media as I used to because a girl is busy, but
Busy, yes.
but the main landing spot for my work is my website, GarrettMcQueen.com. You can also check out the Trilloquy podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, except for Spotify, because when Inawale said she was done with Spotify, I said, all right, well, then that must mean I'm done with it too. So, so not Spotify, but wherever else you listen to podcasts, and the website trilloquy.org. As far as the administrative things, I encourage everyone to check out the work of the American Composers Forum. They're an equity driven and rooted organization that I'm so proud to be affiliated with as a board member. Be sure to check out the work of the American Composers Orchestra. We're over there working to shake up the ecosystem, specifically when it comes to orchestral music. We have calls for scores that we put out. There's a call for scores out right now as we're recording this, where we will be collaborating with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, highlighting works by Black and Brown composers exclusively. So this is your chance to, get your music on stage and recorded for your use. And everything else, just Google me. I'm there. The good, the bad, the ugly, everything. It's out there.
Google me, baby. That's right. Well, Garrett, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a cool conversation, getting to know you a little bit better. And we will be right back with Pure Black Joy. Woohoo! Thank you, Garrett.
Thank you.
All right, and we are back, and it is time for our favorite segment of the show. And a 1 and a 2 and a 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's peanut butter jelly time. Peanut butter jelly time. Peanut butter jelly time. Peanut butter jelly. Peanut butter jelly. Peanut butter jelly with a baseball bat. Peanut butter jelly. Peanut butter jelly. Peanut butter jelly with a baseball bat. Hey.
My cold came back there at the end. Sorry. Yes, it is Pure Black Joy, where we shout out the Black things and people and places and ideas that are making us happy this week. I hope mine doesn't overlap with yours, Lee. Maybe it will.
Okay.
But RuPaul's Drag Race UK has recently premiered, and y'all, Black Peppa,
Oh, I love her.
everything. Everything.
Do I need to
Everything.
check the girl out?
You
RuPaul,
do.
Okay.
You do.
RuPaul, give Black Peppa the crown right now.
Right now.
Now, I have not seen the second episode. I can't imagine that she would get eliminated for any reason. Yeah, well, this queen walked into the room with a mask of her face on her face, which she then took off to reveal her real face. It was the gag of the century. She won the mini challenge. She won the runway. She killed both of her runway. Like, she was giving fashion. She was giving art. She was giving humor. Black Pepper's just everything.
Okay.
Everything.
I'll have to get into her. Yes.
And where is she from? I can't remember.
She's Caribbean.
Mhm. Well, we'll find out.
Sometimes it's like, okay, not my island, and then you don't kind of remember it, but you still know where it is, right? And that's never any shade. It's just excessive pride. So,
well, anyway, Black Peppa, shout out to you. You're amazing. I can't wait to see the artistry that will be on display as you earn your way to that crown, girl. So shout out to Black Peppa.
Yes, Black Peppa.
Black Peppa, yes.
Well, my PB&J is a little news from my alma mater, Howard University.
Okay.
Howard University, of course. This is a story that I saw on their student newspaper on Instagram, and it is that they are joining the Denise Graves Foundation partnership with the Metropolitan Opera,
What?
HBCUs, and America's most preeminent conservatories. So this is straight from, Howard's news site. Shared
Yes.
Voices is a really dope program. I'm just gonna read straight from it. It says contemporary classical music program for undergraduate and graduate students, which is reminiscent of the rich history and connection between elite, historically Black colleges, universities, and America's most preeminent conservatories. Shared Voices is a year-long program that will bolster collaboration between students and administrators, which will lead to a more dynamic and diverse classical vocal arts landscape across the country. Students from Howard, Fisk, Morgan State, and Morehouse will form musical alliances with the Met, faculty and students from Juilliard, Manhattan School of Music, Oberlin, and Peabody Conservatory. Shout out. That is awesome. That is
I love
super
That's
that.
awesome.
amazing. That's amazing.
I love it, especially as I love intentional partnerships like this with HBCUs, partly because I am the product of such a partnership, an organization that decided to partner directly with the young artists at a HBCU. And it was just a really awesome way to help develop young musicians and diversify the field. So shout out to that. This is the first cohort, the very first cohort, has just kicked off of students who are part of this program. I believe they're kicking off this week. Actually, I think today, probably as we're speaking.
Wow.
Yeah, on the campus of Howard in Washington, D.C. So shout out to that. And it makes me just super proud that's happening at Howard too, because they already have a long, the music program there is pretty old. It's pretty old. It's 100 years old, probably. I don't know exactly, but I know it's at least 100 years old. A lot of the arts are. So, there's a long legacy there. And I'm just wishing everyone who's a part of that the best, that they, grow, and that we're all able to grow and just see the fruit of this project. So yeah, shout out to Shared Voices. Shout out to Denise Graves Foundation.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Shout out. That's fantastic.
Right? Warmed my soul.
Mine too. I love stuff like that. And I will add, so last week, the Ebony Magazine's 2022 Power 100 list came out, and I was so excited to see a friend of the show who appeared on the Black Women's Leadership episode earlier this summer. Elizabeth Clay Roy was on the list. Recognized,
Yay!
recognized for her work leading the organization Generation Citizen, and she is in really great company. Also on the list are Emmy winner Quinta Brunson, Oscar winner Ariana DeBose, Pulitzer Prize winner Michael R. Jackson, and the Honorable Justice Ketanji. So I was super excited for Liz. Liz happened to have been the very first friend I made when I moved to New York, and also the very last friend I saw right before I left. So super excited for her. I'm glad she's getting this kind of recognition, and congratulations to the other 99 folks on the list. Thank you, Ebony.
Yes, absolutely. That's fantastic. And if you have not listened to that episode, it's a fantastic episode moderated by our very own Dr. Lee Bynum. But yeah, go back and check that out from June. Let Black Women Lead is the name of the episode. But congratulations, that's awesome.
Yay.
Well, I think that's going to do it for us this week. As I mentioned earlier, we are on Wednesdays now, everyone. Wednesdays. So
Wednesdays.
now, yes. So now, don't get mad. We don't pop into your feed on Mondays. Just, personal and professional things. The stars have realigned, so now we're on Wednesdays. But speaking of, dropping into our reviews or whatever, leave us a review. That's what I'm trying to say. Leave us
With
a
5
review
stars.
with
Oh,
5
5.
stars.
At
Cinco, please.
A few little words would be nice too.
Some
Mhm.
words.
Just saying.
Yes, absolutely. All of those things. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to tell all of your little friends about us and that we're fun. We're not buttoned up. We're fun. Somebody called us buttoned up the other day. Like, what? Where do you see any buttons? Like, y'all, anyway. And of course, we want to thank Garrett McQueen for being with us this week.
Yes.
Fabulous Garrett. Cannot wait to go and kiki with Garrett sometime soon and hopefully have him on the show again. And check us out because we're going to be on the Trilloquy podcast. I'm not sure exactly the date of that, but it will be this month. So stay tuned. So you might as well just go and subscribe to Trilloquy. Anyway, and we'll pop into your feed at some point. But I think that's it. Did I mention everything?
You should ask us for words of wisdom, and then we're not going to say anything. But we do that every week, so let's get that out of the way.
Okay. Well, do you have any words of wisdom?
Of course not.
Bundle up. Wash your hands. Wear your mask.
Wear your mask. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so stupid.
That's it.
I just
Wash
don't
your
understand.
hands.
Just wash your hands. Just wash your hands.
Cough and sneeze into your arm or something else, not onto your hands. I've seen it so many times.
Oh,
Please stop it. Please stop it.
Uh,
Please.
Well, on that note, everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after. Yeah, that's right. Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. 2 Wednesdays from now. We'll see you then. All right. Love you. Bye.
Bye-bye.